Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayikra, Tavshin Pei Aleph. I'd like to dedicate tonight's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. The Parsha begins, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, Yamar Tolaim, and say to them, Adam, a person, Ki Yakrim Mikem Karban LaHashem, when he will offer an offering from God to God. So Rashi comments that these words, Adam ki yakrim mikem, a man who shall offer from amongst you, means when he decides to offer. The karbanis nadava diber ha'inyan. We are talking about here voluntary offerings. There are karbanis, sacrifices that are voluntary, and there are those that are obligatory. And Rashi tells us that the beginning of the parsha is talking about the voluntary ones. Now, there's an interesting question posed by a sefer called Berchas Peretz. Berchas Peretz was written by Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. Now, the last name Kanievsky may sound familiar to many of you because there is a world-renowned rabbi in Israel, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and he is the son of Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky. I always liked saying that when I was growing up, the Rabbi Kanievsky that was world-renowned was the father, the present day, the present Rabbi Kanievsky's father, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, who is known as the Stipler Gaon. He was from a place called Harness Stipel, so in short, it's called the Stipler, a person from Stipel. That's how in Yiddish, that's how people in Europe, that's how people refer to. He didn't have an official position. He was never a rabbi of a community. So he was under the Stipler Gaon, the rabbi, the sage, the Stipler sage. That's just to give it some little, context of the person who I'm citing a thought from. But he has a commentary on Chumash. And in this commentary on Chumash called Berchas Peretz, he poses the following question. And this is not a question that's unique to sacrifices. It's really a question about mitzvahs that we find that are voluntary. There are many mitzvahs in the Torah that are voluntary. Number one, last week's parasha, we talked about the donations towards the Mishkan, donating the materials towards the construction of the Mishkan. So besides for a half shekel that everybody had to give toward that was used eventually for one part of the Mishkan, all the other materials were voluntary. That's it. Most of it was voluntary. Here we're going to be discussing, the Torah is going to be discussing sacrifices that are voluntary. There are mitzvahs that are voluntary. There's a mitzvah of a person. There's a mitzvah that discusses a person who becomes a nazir. Nazir means he takes a Nazirite vow, which means that he's prohibited from wine, cutting his hair, becoming contaminated from dead bodies. That's all voluntary. The Torah never obligates a person to do that. Not only that, even when it comes to commandments that are obligatory, there are parts of them that are voluntary. So for instance, when it comes to, we have a mitzvah to take from our new produce and to give a portion of it to the Kohen. That's called Shuma. Then after we give a part of it to the Kohen, we give a tenth of it to the Levite. Now, how much do we have to give to the Kohen to fulfill the mitzvah of Shuma? And the answer is, theoretically, you could take one kernel of grain and give it to him, you've done your mitzvah. If you do more, you've done more, no question. If you do more, you can give more truma. You can give him more if you'd like to. But essentially, the obligation is any minuscule amount, and the rest is up to you. If you want to give more, you give more. If not, not. So, Berchas Peretz poses the question, if these things are necessary for our service on Hashem, if Hashem deems them necessary for our service, then why aren't they obligations? And if they're not really necessary, then why does Hashem want us to do them? That's his question. How do we understand the nature of voluntary commandments? Why are they voluntary? If they're worthy of being Hashem, if they're worthy means of serving Hashem, why didn't Hashem make them obligations? So the Berchas Peretz explains in the following way. He starts off with a question. We have a mitzvah to love Hashem. We say it in Shema. Hashem Elokecha, you shall love Hashem, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your resources. Now, the question is posed, How can one be commanded to love? You can't command someone to love someone. Either you do or you don't. You can't tell someone to love them. Tell them to be nice to them, treat them nicely, but love them. That's an emotional thing. It's a chemistry of sorts that takes place between people. Why does it happen? I don't know exactly. But it's something that happens, something that develops within a person seemingly on its own. So how can there be a mitzvah to love Hashem? So actually, the early commentators, the Rishonim, they deal with this question. If you look in Rambam Maimonides, he says the way to coming to love Hashem is by contemplating God's reimus, God's exaltedness. You study the creation, you see the greatness and the wisdom in creation, the wondrous creation around us, and then you see this wondrous creation, and you say, Hashem made all these wondrous things. You're so amazed at what you see that develops the love for Hashem. That's what the Rambam says. That's what Maimonides says. Choivas halvavis, the duties of the heart, says that it's about contemplating all the kindness that Hashem has done for every person. When you contemplate and feel gratitude to Hashem for everything that He's done for you, then that brings you to love Him for all the kindness that He bestows upon you. So essentially, we do have two approaches of how to perform the mitzvah of loving Hashem. You have to bring yourself to love Hashem. How do you bring yourself to love Hashem? So the Rambam says, by studying the wonders of creation. Chavos Salova says, by contemplating Hashem's kindness is you from day one until wherever you are. But Birchas Peretz asks, but nonetheless, not everybody reacts to that. Just not everybody reacts to those kinds of things. So what does that person do? Is he stuck? So he explains in the following way. The Mesalas Yesharim, Path of the Just, written by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Litzato, talks about a trait, a midah, a trait called zrizas. Zrizas means doing things with a zeal, with a zest, with an excitement, enthusiastically. There's a trait. This is how we should serve Hashem. You should be excited about serving Hashem, and when you're excited to do something, you do it fast. You do it with alacrity. Do it with zeal. So Mesalas Yesharim, though, poses the question, so that's very good. If you've got that enthusiasm in you, then you'll act enthusiastically. You'll ask with zeal and with zest. But what if you don't have this enthusiasm? What if you don't have it in you? You're not excited. You're not joyous. So how are you supposed to act enthusiastically then? Says the Mesalas Yesharim that we assume that you have to first have the enthusiasm within you, and then you can act enthusiastically. Mesalas Yesharim tells us it works the other way too, because there's a rule that we are molded by our actions. Our actions mold us. And therefore, if you act enthusiastically, over time, you will become enthusiastic. If acting enthusiastically is a product of enthusiasm, then it's not just a product of enthusiasm. It definitely can be. But you could actually create enthusiasm through acting enthusiastically. They go together in both directions. Therefore, it says on Mesalas Yesharim, if you're lacking that enthusiasm, that alacrity, that joy, that excitement about serving Hashem, act that way. And your actions will then eventually make that imprint on your essence, and you will become enthusiastic. Says the Birchas Peretz that this is a way to coming to love Hashem. If you love someone, then you don't just do what you have to do for them. You do for them more than what you have to do, because you want to please them. You love them. You want to please them. So and it doesn't mean like, no big deal. I'll do it. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, maybe because you love them so much. But in essence, when you really love someone, you are ready to go beyond and really invest of yourself in doing something beyond what you have to because you love them. So if giving up from yourself beyond your obligation is a result or a manifestation of your love of someone, then acting that way, then doing things that way will create love within you. If you voluntarily decide to serve Hashem for the sake of serving Hashem, meaning inside, am I really into it? No. But if I can get myself to voluntarily give of myself to serve Hashem, and again, I'm doing it to, my understanding is to do this, you're doing it to serve Hashem. It's not going to work the same way, or maybe in some way it maybe partially works that way. But if you're doing it because, well, if I do this, I'll get rewarded, so then that's not l'shem shamayim. That's not for the sake of heaven. That's for your sake. But if you can get your focus to do something l'shem shamayim for the sake of heaven, right, and try to get out of your focus the personal gain, as much as you can focus and actually do something for Hashem beyond your obligation, and you invest yourself beyond your obligation for the sake of His service, then that is a manifestation of loving and that will now create the love within you. So then, therefore, says the Berachas Peretz, the nature or the nature of all voluntary mitzvahs, and there are a number of them. There is obligatory mitzvahs also. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows we need obligations. We don't have obligations. We're not gonna. We don't have any kind of structure. But there's a very big place for voluntary mitzvahs, because if you voluntarily serve Hashem, then that creates the love within you, because a person does beyond they have to do and invest of themselves beyond what they have to do for someone that they love, for someone that they have an emotional connection with. If that is how I serve Hashem, I didn't have to do it, but I voluntarily do it. I invest in myself. I give it of myself for the sake of serving Hashem. So although I may not be feeling the love, but I'm doing it for the sake of Hashem, that will create the love. So therefore, the question that Berachas Peretz asked was that if something is deemed worthy of service of Hashem, why isn't it an obligation? That's what the answer is. We always look at obligation as, if Hashem obligates us to do it, that means it's really necessary. That means it's really important. But the Berachas Peretz is teaching us that even that voluntary mitzvahs have a very important place in serving Hashem, because it's a means of developing the love of Hashem within us. Because if we can invest of ourselves voluntarily in the service of Hashem, for serving Hashem, then being that is something that you do for someone who you love, even if you don't love Hashem yet, doing those kinds of things will now create love within your heart for Hashem. And therefore, we have these voluntary mitzvahs, and they play a crucial role in our service of Hashem, because they develop within us the love of Hashem. If you can develop the love of Hashem in the other ways, that's great. Gratitude to Hashem, recognizing Hashem's greatness, those are all valid approaches too. Though they're all very strong approaches. But there's another approach. And the other approach is, if you voluntarily give up from yourself for the service of Hashem, then being that a person who loves someone, that's what you do for that kind of person that you love. And when you do that for Hashem, that will develop the love in you. The next point I'd like to share with you is again on the beginning on this pasuk, where the pasuk says again, Perek Aleph, chapter 1, pasuk Beis, verse 2. Again on the words Adam ki yakrim mikem karban laHashem, a man who offers from you a sacrifice to God. So Rashi cites a medrash that focuses on the word Adam, which means man. Now, what I mean by man is like man as in human as in human. So Adam, a man who shall offer. Now, when you want to talk about a person, the word is not typically Adam. The word is Ish for man, Isha for woman. Ish becomes the word if you're talking about a singular for both. It takes on the masculine form. But the word Adam is not typically used when you want to say a person who does something. And therefore, Rashi cites a medrash that's actually telling us a message that relates to the word Adam as referring or alluding to Adam Harishon, the first man. The first man was Adam. And by saying Adam Kiyakriv, by calling every person who's bringing a sacrifice Adam, it's telling us we have to be, when we bring a sacrifice, we have to be like Adam, like the first man. In what way? Ma Adam Harishon Vayikra min hagezel. Just as the first man did not bring any sacrifices from anything stolen, Shakolo Yeshaloi, because everything was his. Af atem loisakrivu min hagezel. You too shall not offer a sacrifice from something stolen. A person might think, this is a gift to God. God really owns everything. I could take it from anything. It can be accepted from anything at least. No, not acceptable. But how is the Torah telling us that? By using the word Adam, which is to remind us, think about the first man who, when he brought sacrifices, there was nothing to steal. It was all his. You too, don't bring anything from stolen objects. So Michtav Eliyahu asks that still, it's very strange that the Torah is trying to bring out this point, again, with the word Adam, in this manner. There are times where the Torah tells us when you do a mitzvah with something, it has to be yours, like a lulav on Sukkot. Okay, the Torah now again, when you're bringing a sacrifice, the Torah could have also used something similar to that to say it's got to be yours; it can't be stolen. To have to go ahead and bring that out by reminding us of the first man, Adam Harishon, it still seems very strange. And therefore, there's got to be something more that's being brought what's being brought out here. Clearly, as Rashi brings down, it's teaching us you cannot bring a sacrifice from being stolen. But the way that it teaches this to us by telling us, remember Adam Harishon, remember the first man, there's got to be something more to it. So the Michtav Eliyahu explains in the following way, very beautiful idea, and that is that many of the commentaries struggle. Or question, to struggle, how do karbanos work? How does it work? You take this animal, you slaughter it, you sprinkle its blood, parts of it you burn, parts of it you don't burn, sometimes you eat it, sometimes you don't eat from it. How does it work? We know that it brings atonement, but how? How does it bring atonement? And the commentaries say primarily it's what we call a chok. We call it a mitzvah without a reason. We don't really necessarily understand, but the Torah tells us that it works. We believe in what the Torah says, and we do it. And we know that it works. We know not only does it work because the Torah tells us it atones, we know that we know from our historical records that people who brought a sacrifice had a very uplifting experience. It wasn't just, watching an animal get slaughtered and, getting a little queasy. It was a very uplifting experience. So the question is, but what is it about? What is it? What's the meaning behind what you're doing? So as I said, primarily it's called a chok. Primarily it's called a mitzvah without a reason, without a full understanding. But some of the commentaries explain that part of what you do when you're bringing a sacrifice is actually to see yourself in the sacrifice. Just as this animal is being offered up to God, man is offering himself to God. He can't do it literally. God doesn't want human sacrifices. So he does it symbolically in something that resembles him. But what lies in a carbon is the same way that this animal's whole existence is now offered up to God. I offer all my existence to God also. I dedicate all my existence to God. This is what I'm seeing the ultimate sacrifice in the animal, and I have to learn from that that I have to sacrifice myself. I have to give of myself at the highest level to Hashem and negate my whole essence and dedicate my whole existence and give over my whole existence to God. Okay. So Michal says like this. If you're a person, though, who's selfish, now, I don't mean super selfish, but you're not selfless. You have a focus on your physical self. We're not talking about taking care of yourself. We're talking about, focusing on yourself as a, in not the sense of keeping yourself healthy, but in the case of just kind of aggrandizing yourself, in whatever form it may be. If that's the way you are, as much as you are that way, you can't dedicate yourself completely to Hashem. Two things are inherently contradictory. If you're selfish, then as much as you are selfish, you cannot be dedicating yourself to Hashem. You have to be selfless. Now, one of the 10 commandments is we're told, lo sachmod, do not covet. And the question is asked, similar to the question we asked before about loving Hashem. How can you tell me don't covet? If I see it and I like it, I'm going to want it. It's just it's a reaction. It's an emotional reaction. How can you tell me not to have that reaction? So the commentary of Ibn Ezra explains that the nature of a person is that something that is clear to if it's clear to a person that something is beyond his reach, he doesn't covet it. The Ibn Ezra's example is that a peasant doesn't covet a princess. He knows he has no connection. There's just no connection there. He has absolutely no means of getting there, of marrying a princess. So he doesn't covet her. If a person were to look at other people's objects as something that's beyond my reach, if Hashem didn't give it to me, then it's not meant for me. It has no connection to me. I'm not supposed to have it. It's beyond my reach. Unless I do the wrong thing. But in essence, it's beyond my reach. Then you wouldn't covet. And coveting is really something that, encompasses so many things in our life. You can covet an object and want to take it. You can covet honor, somebody else's honor, and want it for yourself. And when you covet something, you're basically saying, that thing, I really should have it. It really belongs to me. I should have it. And sometimes you go as far as to take it because of that. So coveting is really the prime example of when a person is not selfless. That when a person wants to take for themselves, that's what coveting is about. And if you want to be a taker for yourself, then again, that's selfish. That means you're too into your physical self. And as much as you are that way, you cannot, as much as you are for that, you cannot give yourself over completely to Hashem. So therefore, when Rashi brings down, don't steal like Adam Harishan didn't steal, the kind of stealing that we're really trying to bring out by Adam Harishan is what the Michal refers to as Gzela B'Lev, stealing in your heart. When you covet something, and you want something that Hashem didn't give you, then that means that you didn't physically steal. You won't be held responsible for stealing. You're not going to have to pay. You're not going to get punished to the act of stealing. But in your heart, you've stolen. If you want someone else's object, you've stolen it in your heart. It's a certain level of stealing. It's on the heart level. And that's what coveting, that's really what happens when you covet something. That's really what happens when you want something that's beyond what you're supposed to have. Because whether it's what a person has, whether it's something that, you're saying, Hashem, why aren't you giving it to me? At the end of the day, that means you're saying that you want something for yourself. You're not ready to accept that Hashem says it's not meant for you. So therefore, that level of selfishness doesn't allow you to completely dedicate yourself to Hashem, which is what a carbon's about. And therefore, when Rashi brings the medrash that says when you bring a carbon, be like Adam Arishan. Adam Arishan had nothing to covet. Everything belonged to him. He had it easy in that sense. So at the end, when he brought a sacrifice, clearly the sacrifice, he could bring a sacrifice and have those intentions of, I give my entire existence to Hashem because I don't have anything else. There is nothing else that I had. There is nothing else there's nothing else that's beyond me. He understood. He had there was nothing beyond him that made him think, oh, I should have this more than he has, because Hashem gave him everything. He wasn't lacking everything. And there was nothing blurring his vision of understanding that everything that he had came from Hashem. And if everything that he had came from Hashem, that means he has exactly what he's supposed to have. And he's able now to completely give over and dedicate his existence to the service of Hashem. We are being told, strive to be like Adam Harishan. Don't steal in your heart. Don't look at other things that are beyond you and say, oh, I should have that. Because when you do that, you're basically saying that you're not accepting that what Hashem has given to you is what's meant for you and what's best for you. You're going beyond the boundaries of what Hashem gave you. And when you do that, you are now crossing into selfishness. And once you have selfishness, then you'll be lacking in some degree the ability to give yourself over to the service of Hashem. So when the Torah tells us don't steal as Adam Arishan didn't steal, it's telling us more than just regular stealing. It's telling us also by what the Mechtam Elio calls stealing in your heart, where you want to go beyond what Hashem gave you. And if you're going to go beyond what Hashem gave you, then that means you're selfish. That means you're too into yourself. And if that's what you are, as much as you are that way, you cannot do what a carbon's meant to do. Express that you totally give over your existence to Hashem. Strive to be like Adam Arishan. He was able to do it. He had it easy. There was nothing that he didn't have that wasn't his. But Adam Arishan had that clarity. Everything I have is from Hashem. And therefore, he could dedicate his entire existence to Hashem when bringing a sacrifice. We don't have it that easy. But our challenge is to strive to be like Adam Arishan. Don't covet. Don't steal in your heart. Don't go beyond the boundaries of what Hashem has given you. And the more that you do that, the more you'll be able to, through the act of bringing a sacrifice, fulfill the purpose of that, which is to express how you give over your entire existence to Hashem. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe.